Joining us now to discuss the Trump administration's tariff strategy is Stefan Selig, BridgePark Advisors founder, former Commerce Undersecretary for International Trade under President Obama. It's good to have you back, Stefan.
Thank you.
Is it up to China to come to the table?
It can't be. We kind of started this war. And my fear, Sarah, to your point, is that they just are going to be able to absorb so much more pain than we will be in this process.
Why?
Well, first of all, their government controls everything, right? And so they really do have an authoritarian regime. President Xi isn't coming up for re-election. They culturally think in multi-generational timeframes, not two-year election cycles. And so, my fear is that even if the administration, the president is right, and this is a way to reshore domestic manufacturing, are we going to have the patience to get there and wait them out? And my fear is, frankly, China is going to be much more patient than we're going to be capable of being when U.S. consumers find the shelves empty and prices going up.
I think the expectation is at some point there will be a negotiation. And some of these issues that the administration is raising about fairness on trade with China, intellectual property, currencies. I mean, they put up a lot of barriers. It's things that President Obama, President Biden, the Democrats have been railing against, just like the Republicans, for years.
There's bipartisan support to get tough on China. Period, full stop. The question is, what's the best way to go about that? And my concern is we're picking fights with everybody else. Why wouldn't we want our friends and allies to help us go after them to be more effective?
One of the other stated goals, of course, is to bring manufacturing back to the United States, not just to sort of level the playing field. I think there's nobody who would argue with we made a lot of policy missteps over perhaps the last quarter century when it came to China. But what I wonder is your perspective on whether the ultimate goal is attainable. Can we really bring manufacturing back, despite the fact that we did all these things that were wrong? Can we just reverse it all?
Well, I don't think technology goes backwards, and most of those jobs were frankly lost because of technology. But I think having those goals, David, is the right intention, right? So for security and economic reasons, we do need to reshore some manufacturing. Now the question is, and this is my general concern about the way the administration is doing all of these things, is not identifying the right problems. That's kind of the easy part. Fixing them is the hard part.
Yeah, well, there have been any number of administrations. Even during Obama, there was certainly awareness of cyber espionage, for example, and other ways the Chinese were taking advantage. Has nothing worked? What in your experience would then indicate a strategy that perhaps had a chance of really being effective, at least what you think?
Well, as General Mattis said, if you're going into a gunfight, invite your friends with guns. So the one thing I would do is be working much more collaboratively with our friends and allies, whether that's the European Union and Japan, to deal with China as a group, as opposed to going it alone and fighting with them and fighting with all those folks at the same time.
Well, I think they would argue that, while they went in confrontationally with our friends like Europe and Korea and Japan, there are negotiations there. And there are some reports that as part of those negotiations, it would be to try to alienate China and direct more trade away from China.
Maybe, but
can that work?
If you think about in the first Trump administration, it took them a year and a half to negotiate the USMCA with two countries, and the USMCA was basically just a recasting and a polishing of NAFTA. That was one agreement. How are we going to do this with all of these countries that were identified on Liberation Day on any short time frame when we've put these tariffs in place? So there's a sense in the business community, and every CEO I talk to, every world leader, and the markets that you guys follow, that we are doing this in a haphazard way, creating chaos without advanced planning. And what all those folks are looking for is some discipline coming out of Washington as a way to be able to effectively plan.
Well, we also talk to a lot of CEOs, and certainly, as I've indicated many times, privately, when I'm on the phone with them, they are certainly quite concerned. I think it's fair to say. I assume you hear the same. But where do we go from here, then? What is your expectation in terms of what actually happens?
Well, I think for sure, and the Treasury Secretary alluded to this, that they're going to announce some deals. Are they going to be fully fledged trade agreements? They're not going to have had the time to do that. There'll be some forms of memorandums of understandings, agreements in principle that they'll be able to potentially point to having some victories. And I think that's the best we can expect in the near term, and hopefully that de-escalates the environment a little bit and gets us off some of the more aggressive maximalist threats.
Do you think that there's also a goal of raising revenue? Because as people have tried to understand exactly the motivation, certainly the president has come back to that as one area that he believes is a significant benefit here. Just raising a lot of revenue, perhaps setting up for the debate coming, well, it's already started on the tax bill, for example.
I guess, but you've observed this, David, before also, which is if you raise revenue, you're definitionally not bringing back manufacturing, because it is one or the other and they're mutually exclusive. The other thing I would say about raising revenues, again, going back to the first Trump administration, when he adopted the tariffs with China, all of the revenue that was raised from those tariffs went back to the form of subsidies and assistance to American farmers. And so it was literally a wash. And so that would be my concern, even where revenues potentially are going to be raised, they're going to have to be redeployed to assist those folks that were harmed by them.